We'd like to welcome each and every individual to Voices of Integrity with Interesting People's podcast. And today we're going to do Tim as an interesting person. What makes, a person interesting from my perspective, being a person, like it's just being a person. And that's interesting. Like when you think about it, there's 8+ billion people on the planet and no two are alike. I mean, there's similar age, ethnic, gender, ethnic, educational background. So they're similar, but everyone is unique. Everyone is different. So Tim, I'm not sure if it, structurally, I don't know if it's like if I should tell you how I think you're interesting, or if how you should say, share how you think you're interesting.
I think it should be a mix of both.
All right. And so how do we do this?
I would say you go first so it boosts my confidence and so I can think about things that help me and so that I can look at myself in a different light.
So, you know, um, Tim is 22,
Yep.
22.
Yep. Turning
Yep.
23 next month.
Okay. So, and Tim is my son. And so I remember when he came down to me when he was, I think, 5 years old in the morning, and I was at the table, and he said, "Dad, um, like I want to do something about stopping child trafficking." I'm like, okay. Like it was out of the I'm like, okay. Like, like why? Or what what does that mean to you? He's like, well, there's girls and they're doing bad things. And he's got, two older brothers and four older sisters. And he said, well, I've got four sisters, Dad, and they do. And I said, do you know what they do to girls who are trafficked? He's like, I don't, Dad. I just know it's bad. It's like, I want to go over to Thailand. And so that was something that was interesting when I think he was, I don't know, 9 years old. He did a podcast with, Tom Coons, and past president of Century 21, so largest real estate franchise in the world. Tom's amazing. And Tim would always come with these really strange, interesting questions. Like and it's like early in the morning, and he's not, I don't know if he is now, but back then he wasn't, mornings were not something that he actually liked. And he says, Mr. Coons, he's like, how do I make my four sisters happy? It's like, where does he come up with these? And I was just sharing with a bunch of other guys in their 20s who are struggling with, well, and guys in their 40s and 50s that were struggling with coming up with topics. Like they show up to a podcast and what you got? Nothing. Like, how can you have nothing? How do you? So I gave, the tips on how Tim at Secrets at 9 years old, he figured out how to always have something, interesting.
I
So
actually had
that's
somebody call me the other day asking me how to do that.
nice. Nice. So Tim's heart for people, his sense of justice makes him very interesting. His journey in life makes him interesting. What has caused, like, the path he's taken and the things he's had, the bumps in the road, the hard things he's been through, to me, that makes him a very interesting person. I mean, I could go on for the whole podcast, but I think you said I share some things, then you shared something, but I could keep going.
Um, we'll go back and forth.
Okay.
So I find my passion really interesting. Let me know if you can still hear me. I
Yeah.
wrote something yesterday. A chaotic beauty that burns our souls into one another. She asks you, how do you know you love her? And for the many simple truth is when you know, but for you, your complex truth is you see her strength, her beauty, her love, her light, her fight. You see her for her. She says, I don't know her. I only feel this way for a short time being, but she hasn't come to see it in me yet is my passion, my anger, my love, my fight. has kept me around. It's a need in my soul and an embodiment of who I am. Never to put out the flames, for the flames have created beautiful ashes to use as a base and fertilizer for extraordinary gardens.
That's just wild to me. Like that's an interesting person where him takes something and he puts it to poetry. Yeah, that's not his grandfather was like that. My dad was like that. He could do poetry. Me, yep, never. Maybe I had to do it in school, but I didn't like it for sure. Like doing it.
I also wrote, why do I stare? Why do I lock eyes and not let go? I've been scared, I've been hurt. The eyes that the path to the soul, her eyes that make you feel safe, they heal you. You've been scared of eyes since your brother passed away. The last thing you saw was his life fading away. The locked in the moment, just a split second reality, but in your truth, the moment has dug deep into your soul, your very existence.
So another thing I find interesting about Tim is like he's a deep thinker. Like he sees things that other people don't see. Um, like he and I can just talk. Like we just like I was introduced to a concept of a what is it called? A soul. I forget what it is. Not a soul root. Anyways, it was it's like it's like you can have good ones and bad ones, and you can have people go ahead and drive to it. People like it's connecting. It's like something brand new. We'll do a whole podcast on it, I'm sure. um
So somebody told me something very interesting lately. They said that the devil is real, but the devil isn't a person, the devil's within. And those moments of deep darkness that want you to do terrible and heinous things, that's when the devil comes into your brain.
it's interesting. Let me see if I can find it. Just a second. So it's so the book is the book is I don't know if you can see it. It doesn't uh,
There it is.
yeah, there's so the value exchange, and I love the cover. You know, it says the subtitle. So the title is the value exchange, practical supernatural way to finally free yourself from wounded thinking. And went to a seminar on Saturday with both authors, and then went out to eat afterwards with one of the authors. And it's just like I've been through a lot of stuff on healing, but I've never been through anything like this. I mean, it was just, I'm like, just, I don't know. It says identify each coping mechanism. So here are the 5 coping mechanisms: self protection, self motivation, self evaluation, elevation, promotions, self comfort, self justice. And so, like, there's a system to go through and create awareness. And it's like, I don't know, it's just very, it's just very cool on what it
Yeah.
is. And so these are things that, these are things that I can talk to Tim about. And then like he jumps in and he'll go ahead and, he'll jump in and he'll go ahead and share some things, and I share some things, and we go back and forth and develop these really, cool models. And so, um, so they call them, here's what it's called. It says soul ties. I've never heard of a soul tie.
I have.
Have you?
Yeah.
And then it says this one here on the cover of the book. It's so cool. There's a barbed wire fence, and then it's cut, and it's going up, and then the barbed wire turns into a bird that flies free. Like it's just like the picture of it, the picture of it is
What is it?
just what's that?
What is it? That sounds like something I'd like to draw.
Yeah, it's like barbed wire. You know
Uh-huh.
how barbed wire has the hooks and stuff in it?
Yeah.
And it's got one, it's been cut and it's kind of facing up, and then the barbed wire turns into those little hooks. It's like
Right.
it's turning into something free, like it's freeing, like we have barbed wire, like you envision being tied up with barbed wire, and then you
Right.
can't get loose, and all of a sudden, I mean, uh, the author, and um I'm 60, she's I think 72, and she had her grandson went through the I think both of her grandsons so went through the same exact thing that you and Jonathan did,
Really?
and one of them died. Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, really, really, like it's like, huh. Ugh. So yeah, it's so I know you got to run, Tim. Thanks for sharing. Anything else that you find, I mean, like what types of people do you find to be interesting? Like, what's an interesting person to you?
So an interesting person to me is someone who's been through a lot of, crazy things that, put them in different headspaces. And I find when those people thrive through them and push through the pain and create this beauty, that's interesting to me, is when people suffer, they use that suffering to help others, not only prevent them from suffering like they did, but to teach them the ways to go around the suffrage and still get the beauty from the pain.
Yeah, I love that too. Like what I find interesting to me is that for sure. I also find like people who are introspective, like people who are not just surface or superficial, like people who are open, people who aren't like like I don't find, people like on the quantum, in the quantum feeling model. Like I find, people that are, you know, people that are entitled, like I don't find them interesting. I'm like, I just have no interest. People who are self-righteous, like I have no interest in like that. To me, they're not interesting. They're not people who are victims. Like, what's interesting to me is the people that are often like the victims. I'm serious. It's strange. Like you probably experienced this. The people who are the victims, like, woe is me, my life is so terrible. And you look at what's happened to them in their life, and you're like, really? Like that's, I'm not saying that's it. I'm not saying it's that. But
They always
people,
say they say that God sends the greatest battles for the greatest warriors, but sometimes those people put themselves into those battles.
yeah, right. That's another podcast. That's one I was thinking about actually today is, people that have a pattern of going back and doing the same thing again and again and again. And you just kind of go, we can see it in other people. Like I was thinking, like, how do I do that? Like, how do I do that? Like, I mean, I must do that too. And so, like, how do I identify those things? But that's another podcast for another time. But interesting people, like, I think when we, I think when we understand, like, I think my worldview helps me to see people in a very different way. I mean, so my dad was pastor, so I was raised Christian, very devout Christian. So I believe that everyone's creating God's image, and so for me, like that's a creation. Like somebody created something. Like Tim creates poetry, I create models, and so like you have a blank sheet of paper, you have nothing, and then all of a sudden you have something. And I think that's when we live in the image of God, like how He created us. He created us to be creative individuals. So when you understand that people went ahead and like God created them to be amazing, and you see that amazingness in them. I mean, to me, like there's something just absolutely interesting about everybody. So, Tim, any other closing thoughts here?
Nope, nothing I got.
So, thanks for being on Voices of Integrity with interesting people. If you know an interesting person, for sure you'll want to pass, that person along. We'd love to have, all types of, all like to really help us to understand other people better. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with the individual who invited you to participate. Definitely, for sure, don't be a spectator in this podcast. Be a participant, and so join the Life GPS mobile app. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. Have an amazing day. Bye bye.